The coronavirus outbreak has severely disrupted the food sector, but also a critical offshoot, the redirection of unused cuisine for people in need. In normal conditions, this is done by a social enterprise called Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, with help from volunteers and outside funding support, which is now lacking. To bring us up to date is the organization's New England coordinator, Dana Siles. Thank you very much for being with us, Dana.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having us.
Talk about what happens normally, because there's a lot of unused food, good unused food, and a lot of need. So explain that equation a bit.
Yeah, so we normally recover excess food from businesses who are experiencing any level of food waste, whether it be on a small scale, like 10 or 15 pounds, or on a large scale, like 50 to 100 pounds or even more. So we pick up from businesses who are hosting catered lunches. We pick up from restaurants and hotels, etc. There is a huge need for prepared and fresh food ingredients all throughout the greater Boston area, now more than ever, which I know that we'll get into separately later. But normally we are feeding places like Children's Services of Roxbury, or Casa Nueva Vida, or Boston Rescue Mission, or Women's Lunch Place. And the people who we're serving range from any level of food insecurity, whether they be suffering from actual homelessness, or they are not homeless, but they are suffering from food insecurity on some level, which, you know, these days especially, someone who's suffering from food insecurity could be someone who's driving in their Toyota with 2 kids and a driveway and a house and the whole 9 yards, but they don't know exactly how they're going to make ends meet. So those people are also people who we serve.
When I think of the supply side here, I see this spike in the supply of food going to waste if you don't get it quickly, and then an abrupt drop. Am I wrong, or is that what you're dealing with right now?
So yes, no, you are correct. So any day that we are rescuing leftover cuisine, time is of essence. So all of the food that we're recovering is perishable. All of the food is either fresh ingredients or prepared food that needs to be picked up the same day, needs to be delivered within an hour, give or take, and is generally consumed by the recipients within 24 hours max. These days, I would say that's more important. Because just as an example, we collaborate with some of the organizations around town. So I'm going to give a shout out to Love and Spoonfuls as a great example. We all know of Love and Spoonfuls. They do incredible work. And they had one of their partners, Trader Joe's in Austin, who had food that would have been discarded. And it was like, had to act right now. And we got a team of 5 volunteers over there. We delivered to 4 different recipients among those 5 volunteers. And the food was properly distributed immediately. So I hope I'm answering your question correctly, but time is of essence in almost every case.
Of course, you mentioned Trader Joe's. I can imagine there are stores that are still open. Are there any other sources of food that you still can go to?
Absolutely. So as far as our recipients, so normally, so pre-COVID-19, we were serving roughly 70 or so different human service agencies throughout all of Massachusetts. And I would say more than half of them were just in the greater Boston area alone. However, a lot of them have been forced to close. The ones that are still open, their hours have totally changed. So we've basically rerouted our rescues accordingly, so that everybody is getting food and not one organization is getting too much and not one organization is getting not enough. But a lot of the smaller human service agencies, so if I say HSA, that's what I'm referring to, a lot of the smaller HSAs, they're in desperate need for food right now because they are anxiously serving their community. One of the organizations that we've been working really closely with this past couple of weeks is Chelsea Collaborative. So we've been giving lots of food to them. They've been handing it out throughout the neighborhood. I mean, a couple thousand pounds of food at least. So the HSAs absolutely need the food right now. Now, that said, our food donor partners have changed a lot over this last couple of weeks. We're obviously not working with any businesses who are hosting catered lunches because they're not working right now. So we're working just with restaurants and with grocery stores and any other food industry businesses, food providers, actually, they say. And one thing that I really want to highlight, and really the biggest reason that I'm so happy to even be on the show with you today, is to let the food service providers know that we are providing our service free during this crisis, so that you can offload food that would have otherwise gone to waste, so that we can properly distribute it to those HSAs who so desperately need the food right now. We normally rely on a pay-for-service fee. That's actually what keeps our organization afloat. We're a 501c3. We don't generally rely on outside funding. But right now we are, because we're not getting paid. So we want to try to keep our operation afloat. So we're relying on generous donations, and we are also, most importantly, just trying to get the word out to the food service providers to let you all know that we are here. We will make it work. We will get your food. We will not charge you for it. We will bring it to the right human service agencies. We match it very strategically. We don't just give any food to anybody. I understand the storage capacities of our recipients, how many people they're trying to feed, what their limitations are based on geography and schedule and all that kind of stuff. So it's all done quite strategically.
You're the wholesaler. These recipients are the retailers as far as redistributing the food. Anything you've heard about how that food is actually getting to the people, especially if they can't go someplace for it the way they used to?
So are you talking about groceries right now specifically?
Yes, how people get the food. If they can't go to an agency, let's say, and pick up something or even consume it there, what happens?
So one thing that we're working on separately, and I may even ask to come on the show again to talk about this separately when we have it all figured out. But one thing we are working on is a home delivery platform. We're actually in the process of creating the tech platform in order to make that happen. We're going to be piloting in one city and then moving it from there. So I don't want to give too much information on that yet because we're still working on it. But what I can say is there's a lot of, if you were to just, if anybody who needs food individually, if you were to just Google home delivery COVID-19 Somerville or Cambridge, you would find specific Google groups of, they're not even organizations, they're just Good Samaritans who are doing really good work. I am in touch with some of these people. I do plan to eventually connect and try to, work with them for rescuing leftover cuisine, but that's really separate from what we're doing. Right now, our goal is to get the food to the smaller HSAs who can properly distribute it to those individuals specifically. So we're basically giving it to one large group so that they can distribute it to the smaller group. And they would be those people who would individually go to those houses to be able to give them food. So if they're elderly or immunocompromised or quarantined, they're able to take care of that part. Does that answer your question okay?
Sure. And if there's anything I imagined in the past about how you normally did things, is that ideally you would have a great number of volunteers storming some restaurant or Trader Joe's and making off with all this surplus food. But you have to be careful about distancing. So how do you do things differently now?
Yeah, I'm actually really, really, really glad you asked that. Thank you. So we've created guidelines for our volunteers. So first of all, if they don't have gloves, they can't volunteer. If they're feeling even the slightest bit ill, we ask them to withdraw from the event. If they're over 60 years of age, we have to right now ask them not to volunteer, and it's really for their own safety, primarily for that. For social distancing, we have I've spoken with all of our donors and with all of our food recipients. Our donors know to meet our volunteers outside with the food. Our volunteers know not to go inside and to even call the donor on the way to confirm this. Then when they're dropping off the food to the recipient, they know not to enter the premises, and our recipient knows to meet them outside in order to accept the food donation. So we are absolutely practicing social distancing. The safety of our volunteers is as important than ever right now. It always has been. We've always gone those, the extra mile to ensure the safety of our volunteers, right down to making sure the entrances are well lit for our volunteers, things like that I've always thought of in advance. But right now it's multiplied in a big way. The safety of our volunteers is of utmost importance.
It sounds as if you need more volunteers, and if you get them, what exactly do they need to commit to?
Yeah, so there's different ways people can volunteer right now. So Right now, I would say the biggest message is actually to the food service providers to let you know that we're here to pick up your excess food, so that you know it doesn't have to go to waste. So whether you have 10 pounds at the end of the day because you've been, you're still in business doing takeout, but you have 10 or 15 pounds at the end of the day, we'll pick it up. We'll make sure it gets to someone who needs it. As far as volunteers, yeah, we always need volunteers. We've had a couple of hundred signups just in the past 3 weeks, I think. It's been amazing. And even our existing volunteers have stepped up to the plate in the most amazing way. And separately, I just have to say, like, I've only seen the best in people this past couple of weeks. Like, I can talk about that separately if you want to, but that's been an incredible experience just from this vantage point. But that said, volunteers who are not eligible to go outside to volunteer right now because, either they don't have gloves or they're not feeling well or they're quarantined, there is outreach work that really needs to be done as far as phone calls and emails. And I've actually set up a system to be able to collaborate with multiple people. So if you're interested in helping out in that capacity, that would be wonderful. And my email is Dana, D-A-N-A, at rescuingleftovercuisine.org, and we can collaborate. If you're not even up to that, to be very honest, we can use your monetary donations right now. That is not something that I even feel comfortable saying because we rely on a fee per service, but it's needed right now just to keep our organization afloat and to be able to continue feeding those in need, especially now, and especially during this crisis.
I want to ask you about that need because ordinarily, there are tax incentives for the food sources maybe, and you get some outside funding, but how has that outside funding changed?
Yeah, so two different things. So the tax incentives for our food donor partners still remains. So anybody who is a food business and they are donating food, they're eligible for, it's IRC section 170E3. It's an IRS code. And essentially it was created to incentivize businesses to donate property. So if you're a food business, then your food is your property. So if you are a grocery store or a restaurant or a cafe or any food service provider who is donating excess food, you're eligible for these enhanced tax benefits. So what we do with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is we keep track of all of our donations. So at the end of every year, our business partners get a receipt that shows how many pounds of food you have donated, even down to how many meals that's provided, how many CO2 emissions that's prevented. It's pretty great, actually. And then they're able to hand that over to their accounting team to do the rest. And I have a link from the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic that shows exactly the step-by-step process and how to do that. So that's that end. That's a different answer than the funding on our end. The funding on our end, like I said before, is normally a fee per service. So now we're relying on donations, but that's totally separate.
Right. Finally, we should mention one more time that if people want to help out in any way, whether as a volunteer, a food donor, or maybe a financial contributor, where should they go to get more details?
So right now we actually, and maybe we can link it, if it's okay, we can link it into this episode because I created a COVID-19 response doc just because updating our website every day would be too crazy. So right now we're just keeping it very bare bones and I created a doc. But if anybody wanted to email me directly for information, they can email me at dana@rescuingleftovercuisine.org. You can also go to rescuingleftovercuisine.org/MA for Massachusetts, which will also link to other things. So if you wanted to volunteer, if you wanted to donate food, if you even wanted to receive food, there's links right on that page that you can go to very easily.